This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, how the Obama administration nurtures racism and poverty. Backed by popular demand. With us this evening, Michael Cutler, former senior INS special agent. Michael Cutler, what an honor and a privilege to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me. And I want you to know how much I appreciate this wonderful opportunity to provide perspectives, information, if you will, that the mainstream media is refusing to provide to its viewers and listeners.
Thank you, Michael. And that's exactly why the Glazov Gang is here, because the media just will not touch so many issues, as we know, especially about the left and issues connected to Islamic Jihad. Let us begin.
Immigration,
Pardon me?
And immigration as well, I have to add.
Absolutely. And as we're going to discuss, leftist policies towards immigration. Michael, let's begin. You're a specialist on this. We discussed this before the show. Your articles at Front Page Magazine, always appreciated, always hit the bingo of what's behind all this. So Obama goes to Dallas, goes to the memorial service of the slain Dallas police officers, and he's pointing to poverty and racism, and apparently poverty and racism are what's behind, this violence and the strife. And yet, as you point out, the problems that he's pointing to are the problems that he's creating. Take it away.
Well, or at least exacerbating. Look, Both political parties are corrupt organizations. I think this is something that's pretty clear to everybody by now. They want to exploit cheap labor. They bring in millions upon millions of foreign workers, both legal and illegal. We bring in foreign students while we complain that our own schools are incapable of educating the engineers that we need, even as American corporations fire the American engineers and programmers and replace them with foreign workers who work for far less money. And then, what's amazing to me is that Obama, Hillary Clinton, and, I'm registered as a Democrat. I'm not being partisan. I am being American on this issue. Turn around and say, well, the reason we have all the violence and all these problems is because American kids, especially American black and minority children, can't get jobs, are suffering in schools that can't educate them properly. There's guns on the street. And he goes through this litany of issues that have been greatly exacerbated in the last 7.5 years since he was sworn in. He has brought in tens of thousands of illegal aliens swarming across the southwest border. These people aren't being properly vetted. They can't be. They're coming without ID. There have been hearings held where it's been shown clearly that so many of these kids swarming across with that surge, as they call it, are members of violent gangs. Law enforcement officials have testified before congressional hearings, in some cases before the very same committees where I have provided testimony over the years, about how most of the calls they're getting from school officials about violence and assaults and attacks within the schools involve these so-called surge aliens, these unaccompanied minors. You look at what's happening with the flood of illegal aliens across the border who, for the most part, are taking jobs that Americans at the bottom rung have been depending upon to scrape out a meager existence in the United States. They're losing their jobs. The construction trades are getting hammered, even where we're dealing with tradesmen being replaced by day laborers who do a lousy job, but they work for lots less. So for the unscrupulous guy that has a construction company who doesn't care about the quality of the work, he fires his Americans and hires illegal aliens. We're seeing it with the H-1B visa programs, and I have to make this point about the H-1B visa program. Hillary Clinton has a website and has a foundation, the Clinton Foundation, under attack for quite a while now. What's interesting is if you go to the Hillary Clinton website or the Clinton website, you will find that she's partnered with the Gates Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to try to help girls and women around the world. Whatever happened to girls and women in the United States, and for that matter, boys and men in the United States? But what's remarkable is that Gates has been the driving force behind bringing in ever more foreign computer programmers, something that the Obama administration has been doing, something that they want to do as a part of comprehensive immigration reform. They talk about we're going to be fair to the immigrants when we talk about illegal aliens. Hillary has promised to give lawful status to virtually all the millions of illegal aliens present in the country. And I can tell you it's not 11 million. More than likely, it would turn out to be 30 or 40 million. There's no way to conduct face-to-face interviews, no way to do field investigations. So this would flood America with tens of millions of authorized workers who have as much right to work as an American. And here's what no one talks about. They could immediately, now that they're legalized, if God forbid we ever do this insanity, bring in all of their minor children. So if we're talking about 30 or 40 million illegal aliens, remember Reagan said his amnesty would give us 1 million to come out of the shadows. Here we're being told 12, and the head of ICE admitted that maybe it's 15 million. If it's just 3 times what they're estimating, which was roughly what happened with Reagan's amnesty, actually more than 3 times, you're talking about 30 or 40 million. If only 1 in 3 brings in 2 or 3 kids each, we're talking about 20 or 30 million school-age children suddenly being enrolled in schools in the United States, even though most of them won't be able to speak English. The Congressional Budget Office has done studies where they've said that trying to educate a child who cannot speak or write English costs 20 to 40% more. So while Mr. Obama made this great speech about how we have to build up our schools and we have to go after the violence, he blithely ignores how many gang members have entered America. He blithely ignores that this country right now is in the midst of the worst heroin epidemic, arguably, in the history of this country. I spent half of my 30-year career at the old INS assigned to DEA. I was assigned to the Drug Task Force for 10 years. Before that, I did a 4-year stint as the first immigration agent assigned to the Unified Intelligence Division of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Most violent crime has a clear nexus to drug use. So you have a president screaming about the guns, ignoring that the drugs flowing across those unsecured border are behind the gangs, fund terrorism, are behind much of the violence and much of the poverty. So now understand what's happening in the tough neighborhoods. Kids that can't get legitimate jobs, who can't get 2 nickels to rub together and want to go out, want to buy things, want to take a girl for a slice of pizza. The only way that's going to happen is by operating outside the law. So when a child living under those horrific circumstances sees a police officer, they don't see a friend. They don't see somebody that they're happy to see. They see an adversary who at the very least is going to stop them from doing what they're doing upon which they depend for money, but worse, will probably arrest them. So the poverty and all the drugs and all the gangs and all the violence that we're seeing in America's poor neighborhoods, especially America's minority neighborhoods, is exacerbated because these kids, for the most part, are operating outside the law. And you have a president who not only refuses to deport illegal aliens, but has released over 100,000 criminal aliens who have felony backgrounds within a 3-year period. And now he's also releasing what he calls the nonviolent drug convicts. On the federal level, there's no such thing. You know, if you go on the state level, you may well find that guy that got pulled over and the police officer noticed that he had a couple of pills in his or her pocket, had a couple of marijuana joints in his or her pocket, and they arrested them. And yes, those are nonviolent arrests, and we can have a conversation about that. But in order to be prosecuted on the federal level, the bar is high. In New York, before the feds will prosecute someone for drug possession, they're looking for hundreds of kilos, believe it or not. So anybody that's peddling that level of narcotics is generally heavily armed. The damage they do to society and the communities that they operate in is inestimable. And it's not just the Latino community. We're seeing it in the Russian communities, the Asian communities, the Caribbean communities, the European communities. It's pervasive. But yet Mr. Obama ignores all of the failures that he is responsible for that could have nipped some of this drug activity and gang activity in the bud through effective immigration enforcement, exacerbates the problems, and then says that it's the poverty and the guns on the street that are causing the problems. The obvious question, why in the world has he done nothing to improve the situation, but everything possible to exacerbate the situation?
Well, thank you, Michael. You make my job very easy because now you even give me the questions to ask you, because this is the next step here, because the left is so concerned, allegedly, apparently, about the have and the have-nots. Well, what you're showing and revealing and unveiling is that the have and the have-nots, this problem is exacerbated by the Obama administration. Now, so because he's not enforcing the border, we have drugs coming in, we have criminals coming in, we have cheaper foreign workforce coming in, we have millions of more children of illegals that will be overburdening our education system. Everything you're saying here, this hurts the little guy. This hurts minorities. How do you explain this leftist disposition of pretending that you're on the side of the poor and on the side of minorities, and yet they're hurting them?
Well, part of the problem, we always hear that the Republicans want cheap labor, the Democrats want the votes. The Democrats want the cheap labor also. Bill Gates, as I mentioned, has partnered with Hillary Clinton. He wants more H-1B visas. If you look at Wall Street, if you look at real estate, all these industries are about moving money through their enterprises. Lots of money involved from the drug trade washes through the banks, washes through Wall Street and real estate. We know this to be a fact. So what we're really looking at are both political parties looking out for short-term profits at the cost of Americans' security and the well-being of our citizens. And this is a problem both parties have created, but this party in particular, the Democrat Party, the party that I'm registered with and rarely vote for these days. So I won't leave the party because I don't want to give up the vote in the primary. But how in the world do you not look at the mayhem you're creating and say, wait a moment, if America is to do well, Americans must do well.
Michael,
and so,
thank you. Sorry for interrupting, but Michael, look, we know that for the left to have political power, it needs racial division. It needs racial strife. It needs poverty. This is really about leftist political power. And, in the heart of the left, there's destruction, and they want to keep people poor. They want to keep people fighting because then they get political power.
Well, it's a divide and conquer strategy. And by keeping people so busy that they're running from one part-time job to another part-time job, nobody has time to look around and say, wait a minute, what's really happening here? It's funny. Very often people will blame the liberals for where we are. There's nothing liberal about the Democratic Party today.
Yeah.
Let's be very honest. They're being fascist. They shut down debate on college campuses.
Yeah.
Campuses used to be the bastion for debate. My degree was in communications, arts, and sciences. I was going to teach debate had I not become a federal agent. How do you have a debate when you have safe areas on college campuses?
Absolutely.
So that the only message that you get to hear is the message that's sanctioned by the administration of universities that want to further this agenda?
Thank you, Michael. Before we go, look, Hillary Clinton also gave a speech, about Dallas and all these issues. She's just continuing this destructive Obama legacy. Before we go, just under a minute, where does Hillary stand on all this? It's the same thing, right?
No, it's actually worse.
Mm-hmm.
She has chastised Mr. Obama for being too tough on immigration. Stop and think about that. She's the one who has promised that if she's elected, God forbid, within 45 days, she will legalize everybody. We spend over $14 billion a year on the legal admission process into the United States without even looking at what it costs to run consulates and embassies where we issue visas. Why are we bothering with a legal system when you have our leaders today, Obama, Clinton, saying that it doesn't matter how you come here? Look, we've got to end the anarchy in law enforcement, both from the perspective of immigration and from the perspective of going after street crime. The most likely victims of the violence in these communities are the minority members of the communities and the members of the ethnic immigrant communities. It's not anti-immigrant to take my position, but pro-enforcement. And if you're pro-enforcement, you are pro-immigrant. In reality, what they're doing is doing the greatest harm to two groups, America's poor and minorities and the immigrant communities.
Michael Cutler, thank you so much. And, you're on top of these issues. Thank you for speaking the truth. And more, always, we see what a vile entity the left is and the destruction that it is weaving. Michael Cutler, thank you for joining the Glazov Gang.
Thank you so much. I look forward to our next meeting.
And I do as well. Thank you for watching the Glazov Gang. Remember, this is a fan-generated show. Please support the Glazov Gang at jamieglazoff.com and make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel of the Glazov Gang. We'll see you soon on our next edition. Good night.